welcome to the 10th episode of Toke Signals TV, where we give you the biggest cannabis and hemp news stories of the week. I'm Steve Elliott, editor and host of TokeSignals.com, and I'll be bringing you the news. First of all, though, let's look at our Toke TV Bud Pick of the Week. This week, I found some tasty flowers at the Kitsap Cannabis Farmers Fair in Gorst, which is just east of Bremerton, Washington, in Kitsap County, of course. This is a very interesting farmers market. It's in an old church building, and this farmers market has deep roots in the community. I like it a lot. One of the couples who vends at a table at the Kitsap Cannabis Farmers Fair was married in that church building a few years ago. That's the kind of roots we're talking about here, and that's what I like to see in the medical marijuana community. There is something very patient empowering about the farmers market paradigm. Because if the vendors at one booth don't talk to you right, don't show you the right medicine, or don't give you the right prices, there's another booth right next door with someone who's eager to do business with you. I like that a lot. It puts power in the hands of the patients where it belongs. And in my opinion, it's a good way for things to be. That's the way things are at the Kitsap Cannabis Farmers Fair, where I found this Ripper Haze for $10 a gram. It is an excellent sativa, a good daytime medication. Great for pain and nausea, yet it doesn't make you sleepy. It instead energizes you. It is a very creative strain if you enjoy that aspect of sativas, and very tasty as well. As you can see, quite beautiful. Let's get into the news. California disappointed many of us when it didn't pass Prop 19 a couple years ago. They had the chance then to become the first state in the union to legalize marijuana. They lost that chance, and Washington and Colorado seized that brass ring last November. California, however, may get another chance because today we had a marijuana legalization initiative cleared for signature gathering in California by Secretary of State Deborah Bowen. Supporters of this measure, which is called the California Cannabis Hemp Initiative 2014, now have 150 days, that is until February 24th, to gather just over 500,000 signatures, 504,760 to be exact, in order to qualify for the November 2014 ballot. The CCHI would legalize the possession, use, cultivation, and sale of marijuana and hemp, and it would instruct the California legislature to pass laws licensing and taxing commercial sales of cannabis and to set standards for driving impairment. Behind this initiative are two guys, the guys you see in the picture, Burton Doozy, 58, a Simi Valley contractor, and Michael Jolson, 45, a medical marijuana activist based in Santa Cruz. Doozy said the effort has been led by a core group of about 10 to 15 volunteers backed by a statewide network of about 500 volunteers. And they hope to recruit as many as 3,000 volunteers, and if they can get donor funding, to hire some professional signature gatherers to gather those signatures to qualify for the ballot. They say that their efforts to legalize marijuana in California go back to the 1990s, predating the Colorado and Washington votes. They say that recent events show that a momentum is going across America, and they hope that that will propel the CCHI to victory. The two men say they are optimistic because of the enthusiasm they're getting from the many people in California who want to see cannabis legalized. We honestly feel this plant can help transform and sustain humankind, said Jolson, who said he wants to see industrial hemp used as a biomass fuel, as well as cannabis available for personal and medical use. And Doozy said that while many pro-marijuana organizations decided to wait until the 2016 election, a presidential election year when traditionally more people vote and it's considered a better time to have ballot initiatives, particularly liberal-leaning ones, his group decided to go ahead and aim for 2014. Put it to the people and let the people decide, he said. In Washington, where the people have decided that they want legal marijuana, we have an announcement this week from the State Liquor Control Board, which has been tasked with overseeing the legal marijuana market in Washington, that the Bank of America will accept marijuana money. One of the biggest hurdles which has been facing medical marijuana businesses is the lack of access to banking services. Financial institutions just haven't been willing to deal with these guys because under federal law, the government views handling money from cannabis transactions as laundering drug profits. And you can catch some federal charges for that pretty easily. But now with recreational legalization, the Washington State Liquor Control Board was in the same situation as has been faced for years by dispensaries. But now the Bank of America has agreed to let them deposit their marijuana profits. The Bank of America declared its willingness to deal with the new marijuana-related businesses, according to Jim McIntyre, treasurer for the state of Washington. I mean, in fact, we're already taking some tax revenues, I believe, for medical marijuana, McIntyre said. He's right about that, by the way. Some dispensaries, not all, but some, do pay sales taxes to the state for their marijuana. So that does happen. So McIntyre says it's not a real issue in terms of their perception. The Liquor Control Board's revenue stream will really kick into gear this fall via applications for 3 different types of marijuana licenses: growing, processing, and retailing. And it's going to need a place to put all that money. McIntyre said his office has already had discussions and that the Bank of America is fine with that, going on to say that they assure us that that's not a problem for them. Now, speaking of marijuana and money in newly legal states, from Colorado, our next story is that the marijuana industry there, the newly legal recreational marijuana industry, got $1 million from an investor group this week. Investors poured more than $1 million into Colorado's legalized recreational marijuana industry. Back in May, this same group of investors committed $1 million to cannabis startups at a similar press event in Seattle, Washington. More than 60 investors from the ArcView Group met with 22 capital-seeking marijuana startups in Denver. And several of the startups are directly involved in cannabis sales or cultivation, and that's a first for the ArcView Investment Group. The investors had committed well over $1 million to the companies by the end of the meeting, according to ArcView CEO Troy Dayton. The total could reportedly have been much higher if it weren't for Colorado's marijuana laws, which require investors to qualify as state residents for 3 years before making equity investments in a marijuana business. This is big, big business, said Trip Kieber, the mogul behind Dixie Elixir's cannabis-infused products. There has been an incredible amount of interest that's been expressed to make investments in this industry, he said. Now, more than 90% of ArcView's investors came to the meeting from out of state. And that's crucial because that means most of them couldn't invest, according to ArcView President Steve D'Angelo. D'Angelo said Colorado has an opportunity to claim a, if not the, leading role in the cannabis industry if it's properly financed. It's an opportunity to build the first big companies and the first big brands. But it's going to be difficult for them to do that if they're unable to get the financing that's available to every other industry. D'Angelo called cannabis the next great American industry when opening the investment meeting. And this meeting happens just a month after Attorney General Eric Holder announced that the Department of Justice will let the new marijuana legalization laws stand in Colorado and Washington. The fact that marijuana is still a Schedule I controlled substance under federal law, though, making it quite illegal at the federal level, creates problems for these cannabis businesses still. Taxes, payroll, general banking have all been negatively impacted because of federal marijuana policy. On the banking side, it's been a scary situation, said Aaron Smith of the National Cannabis Industry Association. They can't use credit cards, and in some cases, they don't have active checking accounts. They pay their payroll in cash and their city and state licensing fees in cash. Now, Attorney General Holder has said that the DOJ is actively considering how to regulate interactions between banks and marijuana businesses that operate within state laws and don't violate other federal law enforcement priorities. For now, according to a senior DOJ official, financial institutions that do business with marijuana companies who are in compliance with state laws are unlikely to be prosecuted for money laundering or for other federal crimes that could be brought under existing federal drug laws. Recreational marijuana businesses are expected to start opening their doors in Colorado around January the 1st. Down in Arizona, we have a struggle by patients for the right to grow. The law, as passed by voters, had a stipulation in it that if you live within 25 miles of the nearest safe access, that is the nearest state licensed medical marijuana dispensary, that you wouldn't be allowed to grow your own. In other words, you have to live farther than 25 miles from the nearest dispensary to have the right to grow as a patient in Arizona. Now, an attorney representing Arizona's top health official has said this week that a constitutional right to control your own health care, which exists in the state of Arizona, does not mean that medical marijuana patients have the right to grow their own cannabis. Attorney Gregory Falls, who represents Arizona Health Director Will Humble, is asking Maricopa County Superior Court Judge Catherine Cooper to throw out claims by two men that as legally registered medical marijuana patients, they are constitutionally entitled to plant, grow, and harvest their own supply. Now, according to Falls, the fact that Arizona voters allowed those with a doctor's recommendation to obtain and use cannabis does not mean patients can ignore other provisions of the medical marijuana law. The law approved by voters in 2010 says patients living within 25 miles of the nearest state licensed dispensary have to buy their marijuana from the store. Now, the ability for nearly 40,000 Arizona medical marijuana patients statewide to legally grow their own hangs on the outcome of this battle. A decision against Humble would mean each of them has the right to grow up to 12 plants, despite the fact that all patients, not just those who live farther than 25 miles from the nearest dispensary, being able to grow at home has worked in other medical marijuana states. Humble claimed that all of that growing in Arizona would occur without state oversight and turn into a, quote, free-for-all. The 2010 initiative, as approved by voters, allows patients with certain qualifying medical conditions and a physician's recommendation to buy 2 ounces of marijuana every 2 weeks. A network of dispensaries is being developed around Arizona. The law says that anyone who lives more than 25 miles, as we said, can grow up to 12 plants, but that is only a small percentage of the state's patients. It is something like 95% of Arizona's patients who do live within that 25-mile zone. With no dispensaries open until earlier this year, that initially gave growing privileges to every patient in the state. So these folks got used to the idea that they could produce their own medicine at relatively low cost. But then when the dispensaries were open for business, suddenly they were not allowed to grow anymore. And that, of course, is leading to some resentment on their part because now they're expected to pay dispensary prices. When those annual cards came up for renewal for those patients who now lived within 25 miles of a dispensary, Humble checked his list of operating dispensaries, and he took the growing privileges back away from any patient within 25 miles of a store. Now, lawyer Michael Walls, who represents the two patients, said the requirement to buy from a dispensary violates a 2012 constitutional amendment passed, incidentally, in response to Obamacare, banning any law that requires anyone to participate in any healthcare system. Now, Falls said Walls is missing the point. He said nothing in the medical marijuana law requires anyone to participate in the program. Prohibiting someone from self-supplying controlled substances, even if the purpose is medical, is not the same as compelling someone to participate in a healthcare system, Falls wrote. Those who volunteer to participate must follow the terms of the Arizona Medical Marijuana Act and rules. Falls also said that the law doesn't require insurance companies to provide coverage for medical cannabis. That means those who wrote the law expected patients to pay for their own marijuana, according to Falls. And he claims the entire lawsuit is based on the desire of the two men not to pay for healthcare services related to medical marijuana. They want to grow their own, Falls wrote, and you can almost hear sarcasm in it. Maybe they also want to self-supply other controlled substances. Neither of the patients, of course, is asking for that. And for Falls to suggest such is patently ridiculous and quite insulting. Humble claims the provision denying growing privileges to patients who live near dispensaries makes sense. When folks are growing their own plants, there's absolutely no way to prevent diversion of that marijuana to other than qualified patients, he claimed. Humble bragged about his agency's robust inventory controls, quote unquote, adding, but when people are growing marijuana in their own houses, there's this big opportunity for diversion to folks that are not qualifying patients. So he actually seems a little more concerned about keeping marijuana out of the hands of people who aren't qualified patients than making sure that marijuana is in the hands of those who need it. The priorities seem a little bit skewed there. Moving to the East Coast and New York. New York City's next mayor is going to favor marijuana decriminalization. How do I know that? Because all three top runners for the office have the same position on marijuana. All three of them favor marijuana decrim. Mayoral candidates Bill de Blasio and Joseph Lota, selected in the Democratic and the Republican primaries earlier this month, both favor marijuana decrim, as does the Independence Party mayoral candidate Adolfo Carrion Jr. I support legislation to decriminalize the display of small amounts of marijuana, de Blasio, the Democratic candidate, said during an online interview with the New York Daily News back in July. The current law saddles many young people with a criminal record unfairly, and it must be changed. I think there are appropriate medical uses for marijuana, and I am open to policies that allow for medical use. Lota, not to be left out, last month admitted he smoked marijuana more than 40 years ago and was the first major candidate to support legalization back when he was the transit chief of the Metropolitan Transport Authority. And Independent Party mayoral candidate Carrion, running against both de Blasio and Lota, has also admitted he's tried marijuana before and said he supports its decriminalization. All three nominees believe that marijuana laws in New York City, which have resulted in more than 400,000 low-level possession arrests and have cost nearly $600 million in taxpayer money, and that's just during Mayor Michael Bloomberg's tenure, must be reformed. Whether de Blasio, Lota, or Carrion wins the mayoral election slated for November 5th, the next mayor of New York City will undoubtedly have a more progressive approach to marijuana regulation and will aid decriminalization efforts. In Massachusetts, we had researchers who announced this week their finding that marijuana use has no impact on healthcare utilization. And beyond that, no health differences were found between daily marijuana users and those using no marijuana at all. Frequency of marijuana use is not measurably associated with the utilization of health services or with health status, according to these findings from researchers at Boston Medical Center and Boston University School of Medicine. As the most popular illegal drug, the impact of cannabis upon health has become a hot topic as marijuana's legal status changes across the United States. These researchers looked at 589 adults who had shown up positive for drug use at a primary case visit. These patients were asked about their drug use, their emergency room use and hospitalizations, and their overall health status. Information about other medical diagnoses was obtained from their medical records. Now, the researchers found that the vast majority of their study sample, 84%, used marijuana, 25% used cocaine, 23% used opioids, and 8% used other drugs. 58% reported that they used cannabis, but no other drugs. No differences were found between daily marijuana users and those using no marijuana, whether looking at emergency room visits, at hospitalizations, at medical diagnoses, or at overall health status. No difference between the two groups. It's common for users of illicit drugs to use both cannabis and another drug, according to the researchers. Therefore, knowing the incremental effects of marijuana upon health in such a situation is important. Even though we could not compare marijuana users to those who use no drugs at all, our findings suggest that marijuana use has little measurable effect on self-reported health or healthcare utilization in adults using drugs identified in a primary care clinic, said lead author Daniel Fuster, MD, a postdoctoral scholar from the Clinical Addiction Research and Education Unit at BMC and BUSM. And those findings appear online in the Journal of General Internal Medicine. From Brazil, we have a bizarre story, and there's a marijuana death. No, nobody has died directly from smoking marijuana. You still can't overdose on it, and it still hasn't killed anybody that way, but it can kill you if you have half a ton of it in your back seat and you wreck your car. This poor guy was carrying 500 kilos of marijuana in his back seat, and his cargo slammed into him during an automobile accident. The victim was traveling from the Brazilian state of Mato Grosso do Sul to Sao Paulo on Saturday when he drove through a Federal Highway Patrol roadblock. The police got after him, and a chase ensued over a 3-mile stretch of road. It ended when the man fatally crashed his vehicle into a tree after losing control of it. And the impact resulted in the man being crushed against the steering wheel by the 500 kilos of cannabis bricks he was smuggling. The police had to pry his lifeless body from the wreckage. Law enforcement authorities still haven't identified the man, who was carrying no ID. The victim's vehicle was transported, along with the 500 kilos of weed, to the police station in Badaguaçu, Brazil. Now let's take a look at 3 must-read stories that you don't want to miss this week on TokeSignals.com. First of all, from Sharon Letts, who continues to wow us every time she writes. She has a piece that you've got to read called Cannabis, Calming the Crazy Bitch. That's her title, not mine. You got to read this, ladies. And men, I think that you can learn something from this too. Sharon Letts has fearlessly written about the challenges she has faced both with hormones and with her other medical challenges during the past few months. And the honesty and accuracy of her writing is a beautiful thing to behold. I would recommend that all of you read Cannabis, Calming the Crazy Bitch. Ron Marksick, of course, our ex-cop, our ex-health teacher, our ex-registered nurse, and our worth-repeating marijuana expert, has written another great piece called The Marijuana Exercise Prescription. And what Ron points out is that the runner's high, which researchers used to believe was due to the body's natural opiates, is in fact due now, research indicates, to the body's natural cannabinoids. It's a cannabinoid thing when you get a runner's high. And these natural cannabinoids that occur within your body are part of the motivation to exercise, according to some of the cutting-edge scientific thought we have today. Read the article and learn more about it. It's fascinating stuff, worth repeating, The Marijuana Exercise Prescription. The third must-read article that you want to take a look at on Toke Signals this week is Marijuana Improves Mental Sharpness in Middle-Aged Men. Not only does smoking marijuana not burn you out, according to this research, but it's downright good for your brain. We have yet more scientific evidence, this time that it actually appears to improve cognitive functioning among middle-aged men from a 2011 medical study. And you can learn all about that on TokeSignals.com. Now, don't forget, we are always looking for pictures of pretty flowers. If you would like to immortalize the buds before you smoke them this week, send them on in to us. Let us make them famous for you. You can see your flowers for the Toke Signals Bud Pick of the Week. I hope that you have a great week. I want you to remember something this time. If you have been waiting for a special occasion to do something, this is the special occasion. It's called life. My advice to you is to stay lifted.